Welcome to another MadTech webcast. I'm Kieran O'Kane. I'm coming live here from the home of AdTech, aka Carber Cross in County Monaghan. That's actually an AdTech fact. Per capita, we are the biggest sort of influencer in the world. Little inside joke there. Today we're talking about the future of AdTech infrastructure and what technologies might be used to evolve the sort of legacy infrastructure we have at the minute and move away from a centralized to decentralized platform. I'm joined today by Ben from the Alchemy Exchange. Ben, how are you?
Very well, thank you, Kieran. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, I have to say.
And all the way from San Francisco, Napa Valley, Ben from Constellation. Ben, it's 5:30 in the morning. I really appreciate your time. How are you, Ben?
I'm doing well. I've had my second cup of coffee, so I'm good to go. Thanks for having me on this call today.
Brilliant, brilliant. Let's just do a quick intro, lads, because people probably don't know who you are. So we'll start with you, Ben. From Alchemy, obviously. Ben, just give people an idea of who you are, what you do, and then we'll jump straight into the conversation because it's going to be an interesting chat.
Absolutely. So I've worked in advertising now for the best part of 10 years. I started my career at Mozu before moving to ShareThrough, where I was their strategic partner director for 4 years, and then moved into influencer marketing briefly, but have always been a fan of blockchain. And yeah, we're hugely excited about using what Constellation have built and the blockchain that Constellation have built to provide a much more effective infrastructure for AdTech in the future.
Excellent. And Ben, let's hear from you. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, well, my name is Ben Jorgensen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a blockchain protocol called Constellation Network. We are a competing protocol to ecosystems like Ethereum, if you've heard Ethereum, or even the Bitcoin protocol. We are a completely separate ecosystem. We've been running for about 4 years. We're ranked among the top 200 of different cryptocurrency projects out there. We have our own currency, and we allow people to build blockchain solutions on top of our ecosystem. So maybe that's an easy way to start.
That is. So I guess it's important for people here to understand that, you know, blockchain's been around in this part of the world in AdTech for a while, and people kind of, you know, roll their eyes in the back of their heads sometimes. And I think that's because there's been a lot of nonsense chat, but actually the technology stuff is quite interesting. We're interested about that technology, blockchain as a technology. So just talk about Constellation versus the likes of Ethereum, right? Because obviously Ethereum is the go-to platform in many ways to build technology, smart contracts, etc. on top. And we've seen a lot of innovation around, you know, and NFTs, DeFi, all that kind of stuff. But talk about your platform versus Ethereum, because it's good to get sort of the elevator pitch as to what you guys are versus them and others.
Yeah, I think it's a great stepping stone, and Ethereum really kicked off an evolution of blockchain technology that you could add immutability to an application. And so people started building applications on top of Ethereum, and they created a standard that you could do this. And they really kind of were the grandfather in allowing kind of our minds to go, well, what can we do with blockchain technology beyond just a currency like Bitcoin? And so you started to see an evolution with use cases around supply chain management. So tracking a digital or tracking an asset as it moves from A to B to C. And so what we saw is actually huge potential for any developer to use immutability or auditability of data at the core of any application. And what that means is we actually said, how can you use decentralized networks to validate any type of data? And so as we thought through this, we saw that in order for blockchain technology to scale, it had to be economically scalable. Ethereum is extremely expensive to use. It's really nice to sit and go into corporate meetings and tell, hey, we're innovative, we're using blockchain technology, but it's so expensive and how to pay for it is so complicated. And the technology wasn't scalable. Like, you really couldn't put a ton of data on the blockchain, and it wasn't fast enough to process or pre-process data. And so when you think about like the early innovations of blockchain technology and the conversations were very limited into their use case. And the AdTech community had certain uses around digital advertising, having immutability of some of the records of advertising on blockchain, but it wasn't scalable, it wasn't that interesting. And so for all of these reasons. And so Constellation comes with a lot of enterprise experience, a lot of business experience of looking at different industries through the lens of scalability. How do we actually look at bringing digital ad exchanges onto a blockchain, like lots of data, and processing that data, tons of data, and provide viable solutions that compete with centralized ad exchanges.
And it's important that it's really important for our listeners and viewers. By the way, we'll take questions from the floor as well during this conversation. That this decentralized piece is very important when you think about the amount of money Google just made in the last quarter. 80 billion they made.
80.5 billion.
Yeah, which is, $65 billion. It'll probably be 85 next quarter. It's just eye-watering to know the amount of money they're actually making. So that leads us nicely to the question then, guys, that why and how do you build ad tech infrastructure on something like Constellation? Like, what's the process? Like, so, we talked about that there's been a lot of sort of blockchain related stuff in the ecosystem for a while. There's a couple of companies that do transparency, etc. But talk about why you would build on the blockchain. What's the rationale for building what we have right now, which is sort of a, very much a cloud-based and sort of very expensive computation piece to build that, to bring that across to something like Constellation? What's the rationale for doing that? So Ben, we'll talk to you about that.
Which one?
Ben Markey. Ben 1 and Ben 2.
I think I'll happily jump in here. I think that, well, 3 years ago now, the IAB came out with a report on the application of blockchain to programmatic advertising, right? And the beauty of a blockchain is all of the data is transparent. You have immutable records of that data. You have instant reconciliations of payment, which really are three great silver bullets to a lot of the issues that the ad tech world faces right now. But one of the key findings from that report was, with the current scalability of the blockchains that existed in 2018, it wasn't feasible to bring the entire ad auction onto the blockchain for the first time, right? And I think that then leaves you as a blockchain ad tech company with potentially test budgets or a nice to have rather than a need to have. And that's not to say there's been some great projects, but one of the reasons that I was so excited that we were able to build on Constellation's hypergraph is the ability to scale infinitely. So for the first time, we can take the entire auction on chain, benefit from all of the benefits that blockchain brings to you, but really provide a new age of infrastructure that is considerably cheaper, that provides you with the reporting that you need, that you haven't seen perhaps in the past. Immediate log level data, I think of, like unlimited queries per second, like huge cost implications on businesses that are trying to run exchanges and trade ads digitally that are kind of washed away, given now that everything is transparent, it can scale, and you're taking a lot of the centralized computing to the edge to allow you for a much more efficient means of transferring information, which is essentially all that an ad exchange is, right? Is transferring information about user A to buyer B that delivers to website C, right? It's just different servers hooked up to each other, transferring bid requests and bid responses. So the ability to bring that onto a blockchain dramatically reduce the cost.
So let's just jump in there, right? Let's talk about that cost saving thing, right? Because infrastructure costs in AdTech are quite high, especially in sort of the exchanges programmatic piece. So let's just talk about how this is really important because, you know, sometimes blockchain gets applied into like industries where it's not needed, right? It's almost like we've got to figure out a way to make this work.
Yeah.
But you're actually looking at this from a cost saving perspective, right? So the biggest cost for a lot of ad tech companies and ad tech in general is the cost of AWS and every other Azure and all the other cloud infrastructure. So just talk about that process of reducing that computational cost and how something like Constellation will work in that regard. And Ben, I guess you can jump in on that one as well, because I guess you're applying the technology in other industries as well. So, but we'll just talk with Ben from Alchemy first about that, and we'll come to you, Ben, about that as well. So talk about how you bring that cost down and why that's important for the ad tech industry and the digital marketing advertising industry, where there's a lot of cost in the middle.
So I think like we've come up with quite a concise way, I think, of describing that. I think at the moment you have data as an advertiser or a publisher, and you use bandwidth to monetize that data, right? What we're going to be doing with Alchemy Exchange is flipping that on its head. So you as a market participant own bandwidth, which you will then monetize with the data that you own, and vice versa. So the bandwidth that you have actually has an intrinsic value on the exchange because of its ability to validate transactions that are occurring within the exchange itself, if that makes sense. So it's rather than you getting a bill in the post for your cloud provider every month, you own your slice of the Alchemy Exchange, and that allows you to then be much more effective with how you use your bandwidth than when you're paying someone else's bill, essentially.
Okay. And Ben, I mean, from your perspective, I guess the thing about your technology, which is quite interesting, is it's interoperable, isn't it? Like you can plug into various things and make them work. And I think this has been the big problem with blockchain for me, because I think people get a little bit sort of like, what is this? But when you apply it to a real problem like this, there is a huge problem in our industry, right? Where 30-40% margin is taken in the middle, right? And the idea here with Alchemy, I guess, is that they're reducing that take rate down because they're able to reduce the computational costs. So I'm interested to see, the interoperability of your platform is quite interesting to this conversation.
Yeah, going back to scalability, our whole vision was that if blockchain technology was really going to scale, developers needed solutions and tools that plugged in with existing digital infrastructures. You can imagine the entire ad industry does not want to build isolated blockchain technology that may or may not sync with their existing digital infrastructure, especially if they're buying data and bidding on ad impressions, and then they have to record that on a separate blockchain that's not interconnected. So what we've spent most of our time doing over the past 4 years are building developer solutions that are integrated within those digital infrastructures and can scale. And what that means really is, when you start thinking about, building out solutions with ad tech data, you're talking about, think about all the different pieces of data that you're collecting on a user that you want to bid on that impression. Geolocation, where that user visited. I mean, look, I'm not an ad tech expert, but I understand how they kind of do tracking and how they're buying and selling media. You cannot store a fingerprint of that on distributed ledger today, and that's where Constellation comes in. We want you to be able to mirror your applications that you're building in the real world, the centralized world, and actually have a mirrored copy of that exact fingerprint on the blockchain. And so I think what's really fascinating about Alchemy Exchange, and to kind of tie that all together, is that a lot of people have this idea of what blockchain could be used because of how it was marketed the last 4 years. And what Alchemy Exchange is doing is actually coming out and saying, wow, finally, there's a blockchain that can actually make advertising interesting. It is a decentralized network that can embrace that data load on a new alternative network. Like you couldn't do that before. And so that's kind of where we come in. And a lot of our mindset is, well, for Ben and the Alchemy team to really grow, they need to have it needs to be cheap enough for them, or else they can't compete from a cost basis. And so our whole ecosystem is there's 0 transaction fees across the network, which will allow them to kind of scale different ad products. So it's not just being able to support the data standards of the IAB on Constellation, but it's also having an economically viable network that they can use as in conjunction with AWS and such. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I that's the part that sort of I think it's important for our listeners and viewers here, because they want to know how you can apply this to problems they have. And I guess Ben from Alchemy, this has knock-on effects, because you're not just addressing a big problem for AdTech. It also has huge implications for an advertiser and a publisher, because at the minute you work with a Google who takes 30-40% margin and makes $60 billion a quarter. It means there's more money in the pockets of publishers, and advertisers are actually getting more working media into the publishers itself.
Exactly that. I think it's quite like a hard problem, and the solution to quantify, right? Like it's right now, even if you just take discrepancies between servers, right? It's largely accepted that plus or minus 10% is an okay amount of discrepancy, which on individual instances where that's decided, that isn't probably not out of the park, right? But when you look at it across the 340 billion digital ad market, becomes $34 billion, which is not an insignificant amount of money. It's half of Google's money, right? So like that itself, just in terms of an investment into an industry which has been thrashed around by tech partners, I think like what would that money do to a publisher? You could increase the number of people that are developing the site itself to improve user experience. You could put more money back into the creative content or branded content that publishers are creating. You can really, by seeing now all of the data and knowing that data is immutable and true, really usher in this premise of what programmatic advertising was going to be, which was analysts and traders. But that can't happen right now because you're seeing such a tiny slice of the information, right? You're basically creating your own confirmed bias with decisions you make about the data that you receive, because you can't see all of it. It's not a statistically significant chunk of data to make wholesale changes to your advertising strategy or your yield management strategy on a publisher side of things. So it will create new roles in publishers, create new roles in advertisers, and usher in people with different skill sets to really kind of invigorate the industry, which I think has largely had its innovations in formats for the last 10 years, which have been amazing. And like, we're okay, right, that's been great, but the infrastructure is creaking now. If we look forward to the next 10 years, Alchemy Exchange will provide you with the infrastructure to take back some of the revenue that you lose every single day and invest that into your respective businesses to improve the services, the products, ultimately the 4 of us on this call that are using the internet will have a better experience because there'll be fewer ads on your page. Your page will.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that, 'cause there's a question here from one of our long-time viewers, first-time questionnaires, is that from a user or basic audience perspective, not an advertiser, what impact do you think the Alchemy Exchange will have on audiences and their expectations of advertising long term? And I think that's important, that if you can increase yield, we might be able to improve the sort of user experience from a user perspective as well.
Absolutely. I mean, there is kind of this theme of reestablishing the value exchange on the internet, right? And the exchange that's proposed, if you give me your email, you continue to see free content. It's like, well, the problem is the content was free anyway. So like there's no additional then value for me as a user. So in the future where there is more revenue and everyone isn't squashed, there's no reason why we as individuals with a Web3 wallet could be involved in that chain from advertiser, exchange, publisher, user, and the new individual affiliate marketing, right? I'm just thinking out loud here, but it does now truly offer you the chance as an uses the internet, because I wholeheartedly believe in the ad funded model for an open web. It just like, it makes sense to me. It's just been greased a bit too hard. So by actually now offering the chance for a user to actually participate in this value exchange, as it were, it's going to change how people view their data, how they make it accessible. Are they happy to see an ad? And I mean, the top headline here is if the publishers make more money from adverts, there'll be fewer of them. So your page will load quicker. It'll be a nicer user experience, and you can just get the content that you want more readily, more quickly, with fewer distractions whilst you're reading it.
Yeah, but Ben, but interesting sort of follow-on question for that. There is that's Ben who, there's the gentleman at Anderson and Horowitz who runs the crypto or blockchain fund. What's it? Chris, is it? Can't remember his name. Anyway, he talked about, you know, how much power the centralized GAFAs have over the digital economy, like the Apples and the Googles and Facebooks and Amazon. And he was talking about, like, you could spend the next 10 years trying to break these companies up. And he thinks that blockchain or Web 3.0 is the way to go around it. And I think it's important we bring this in because, you know, we're talking about the next 10 years of our industry, particularly AdTech, where those companies have such an oversized influence over our industry. And I'd like to get your take on this, because that decentralized piece is really important. And, you know, Arguably could be one of many companies that build in that digital economy. I'd be interested to get your take on that sort of decentralized approach.
Yeah, I think it's actually a really interesting topic. And I was literally just about to dive into that, because we can talk about the features and functionalities that can be shifted over to decentralization in the ad tech world. But if you look at it from a macro perspective of a huge cultural shift that's going on, and that's been going on over the past like several years, is that there's a shift towards trust and transparency. And 5 years ago or 4 years ago, you would have said, well, we don't really trust the blockchain. Like, this seems really shady. Like, I don't really trust this. Now we're all going, do I really trust Google, Apple, Facebook with our data? They're doing nefarious things with our data.
Yeah.
And so our line of questioning and trust that we have in these institutions around what they're doing with our data, we're starting to second guess that kind of transparency that we're giving them. They have really great marketing that this is like fun, enjoyable, you're getting all this. And then there's this new era, these new generations that are coming in being like, I don't really want them to have all my insight. I don't really trust what they're doing with AI and intelligence and kind of this profit on the people. And not to sound this complete revolutionary, but how does that translate into where the next realm of developers and adoption are going? So when you look at Google and Facebook and Apple and the FANG organization, they are constantly competing to be relevant in the developer space, right? And so typically what you have are users tend to shift over to a new dynamic or a new paradigm, blockchain being one, cryptocurrency being this like new gamification of the internet that anybody can get involved. As such, developers migrate to where users are. And so you're having a massive exodus away from centralized ecosystems and digital economies over to this decentralized. And so the next realm of developers and generations are massively shifting over into decentralized programming and building out decentralized applications, partially because of the control, partially because of the privacy measures. And so what you're seeing in like the Ethereum ecosystem alone, they've seen a 200% increase in developer adoption in just the past year and a half. Layer 1 and layer 0 solutions beyond Ethereum, other ecosystems like Constellation, we're seeing a 100% increase month over month in developer adoption. So you're seeing a massive shift. So if you're in the ad tech industry and you're like, well, I don't really know about blockchain, if advertising wants to be relevant, they have to shift their thinking and where the next realm of developers are going, or else you're going to see a lack of innovation completely in digital advertising.
And I guess that brings in the Alchemy relationship with you guys, because the next question I was going to ask is like, Ben, if you could think about you guys being able to take a lot of that infrastructure cost off the table, it means that you could probably get a lot of the ad tech guys innovating around that and not having to worry about infrastructure costs, which let's be honest, that is probably the biggest sort of cost. And a lot of the centralized ad tech ecosystem is their valuations are based off the fact that it costs a lot of money to run these systems. So it's interesting that could be quite an interesting. Some could build a bidder off the back of your platform going forward. When you build that out, there's a bit of the QPS piece. You reduce the cost of that, and then you could basically layer along an algorithmic sort of solution on top of that, and you don't have to worry about the cost. And the value then is the algorithm rather than the infrastructure.
Definitely, yeah. I think like if we take the cookie apocalypse, right, as it's being dubbed as an example, the limitation of queries per second on an exchange prevent you from finding cookies right now at the best of times. So by removing that limitation, when cookies are fewer and further between, you may still, as a buyer, if you want to, find those cookies more often because you can keep querying that exchange until you find it, which then may promote competition around those cookies that are left. But it's a higher CPM, so then you kind of have a make weight whilst we move over to what this might look like in the future. And I think that by then taking this significant cost away and allowing people more effective and then just more efficient infrastructure, there'll be products that we've not even thought of, or applications that we've not even thought of, that people will come in and say, well, if I can target this person using this algorithm, you do then bring in a whole new skill set of people, as you say, like developers go, oh shit, there's this amazing market that's $500 billion, let's say in 2 years' time, that has got this amazing new infrastructure that allows me to build solutions that I didn't think were possible before. And I mean, even anecdotally, our CTO formerly worked at Sky, a large centralized platform, and has moved to Alchemy Exchange, a decentralized platform. So I've kind of seen that happen firsthand, that the infrastructure we're offering provides very, very interesting solutions to long, old, complex problems. And that is now out of the jar. And I think it's trending in one direction, right? I don't predict anything, but like, it just seems to me that once you've kind of seen it this way, you're like, why on earth would we go back to doing it the old way? And I think it would just be more people that have that realization and then want to learn more. Because one of the amazing things about blockchain is that you don't need to go to university to learn about it. You can just go read stuff on the internet, and there is more than enough information about there for you to upskill as a developer or a salesperson or a account manager, you name it. Anyone can go out, learn it, and figure out a way that it might apply to what they do day to day. And then that can then be supported by what we're doing in the Alchemy Exchange. You know, it just really does just blow the roof off in terms of the opportunities and potential developments that we'd see from this in the future as we become ubiquitous.
Yeah. We can go into the detail of how this platform works on a whiteboard session, but I wanted to kind of introduce the people that ease them in, because there's always been this sort of, and I would be one of those people to put my hand up, there's always been a bit of a problem around blockchain in this industry, because people, my biggest issue was always, how do you apply this to real world problems? And as Ben from Constellation says, look, there's a movement going on. to move away from centralized platforms to decentralized platforms, right? And that is a big issue going forward, right? Because we have to reduce the power of these absolute, like, you know, this all feeds into the thesis that these companies have far too much power. The concentration of wealth is poor, and it's great to see developers on your platform, Ben, building stuff, because it's just encouraging more companies to kind of build you know, new solutions, new utility on these platforms away from the centralized platform, the centralized walled gardens and the likes of NFTs. I know it's all a bit gimmicky right now, but that will evolve into something really cool, I think. And likewise, I guess, you know, how do you then apply that technology to our industry? There is a couple of things. Again, the centralized platforms have taken too much money. There is a huge take rate in the middle of our industry, like 30–40%, which is just outrageous. It should be coming down to single digits. It should almost be like how the stock exchange operates, taking, you know, small increments of the trades that come through their platform, and the innovations on the sort of fringes with the constituent players, and in their case, it's the publishers and the buyers, agencies, and sort of and you buy inventory. So you bring all that together, it gets very interesting for me anyway. That's why I'm excited by this. I'm finally seeing the logic of the two worlds coming together.
Yeah, it's pretty fast. I'm glad you brought that up from like a macro perspective. It's you look at how advertising has kind of followed financial trading industry as well. Financial trading industry went into programmatic real-time trading of stocks, right? And then the advertising industry kind of followed suit within 10 years in the early 2000s around doing programmatic bidding of ad impressions, much like you do stocks and real-time trading. And so now what you're seeing in crypto, which the last 2 years, we've seen an evolution into decentralized finance. So removing the middleman from the equation, where you traditionally buy cryptocurrencies on centralized exchanges, people are now going to decentralized exchanges to swap different currencies for one another. And so if you think about that in the evolution of why this naturally projects itself into advertising, is because one currency swap for another currency are two different data types, right? You're basically bidding and swapping two different data types, which are defined as currencies. And so what Alchemy Exchange is doing is taking this decentralized finance model and they're morphing it into advertising. You're bidding on different data types or individuals, and they're providing a transparent way of doing that. So the technology is catching up and we're evolving. And so the natural progression in blockchain is leveraging itself into advertising, much like advertising has followed suit with finance in the traditional sense.
Good stuff. Ben from Alchemy, we've got questions about who your clients are, and I told the person they'll get in touch with you. So, but just final question there, Ben from Alchemy. So, what can we expect from you guys in the next 6 months? Then, I mean, obviously, you guys have a strong relationship with Constellation. This is still an evolving technology, very, very much so. But it's pretty exciting because, like, no, look, we all would love to see Google and Facebook and Apple and Amazon broken up tomorrow morning. But the wheels of our government and we're not obviously China. We'll just have the CCP to break them up. But that would be great. But that doesn't happen in democracies. So we need a plan B, and obviously solutions like this could be quite a good answer for that problem.
So what we're doing at the moment, our CTO Chandru and his team are readying the endpoints that we're going to need to hook into the existing system. So Ben Jorgensen was speaking about the interoperability of the Constellation technology, and because there's been such a wide adoption of OpenRTB, there's a standard by which we can use, by which everyone trades ad digitally, right? So we can adopt that standard to make us interoperable with the existing ad market, create the endpoints that we require to integrating with DSPs and the ad server side of things for publishers, whether that's pre-bid or otherwise, to really then build out the framework and create an MVP that allows us to demonstrate to people the transparency of the data, the immediacy of the data that exists, and what that then kind of leverages them for the moving to the future. Like, if this is where we are today, I want to start thinking about what this means for your sales strategy in Q4 at the end of next year, right? Like, this is something that once it's out can be baked into your existing ad sales, whatever it may be. You're not selling different ad formats. It's not a new ad format. This is just a much more efficient way for you to sell what you already have. So there's, in terms of the adoption, it's really going to be just educating the community and just kind of making them understand that it's not as scary as it sounds, to be honest with you. Like, it is a logical solution. So just educating the market, getting our MVP likely to be in publishers' hands first, and then really doubling down on adding audio, digital out of home, you name it, it's connected TV, to then give you as a marketer this kind of God level view of everything that you're doing for the first time. So you can see exactly how your digital out of home performed against your audio, and then what your video did versus your connected TV, because you can see all of the data for the first time and make effective, informed decisions without any confirmation bias that just happens from a lack of transparency.
Okay. On that note, we'll finish up there. Ben from Alchemy, thank you. Anybody who wants to get in touch with Ben, I'll send the emails out to whoever wants it. So we'll get in touch. Ben from Constellation. Ben, thank you very much for being on the show today. I really appreciate your time and fascinating what you guys are building. I'd love to talk to you more about it in the future. Maybe we'll get another chat potentially in the future. And man from Alchemy, thank you for your insight as well. And thank you all for joining us today. That was great. We will see you next time on the MadTech webcast.
This is great. Thanks, Kieran.
No worries.
Thanks, Kieran. It's been great.
See you there, Ben. See you, Ben's. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.